Purina believes no one should have to make the impossible choice between their own safety and their pets. But nearly half of domestic abuse survivors delay leaving because they can't bring their pets with them. Through the Purple Leash Project, Purina is helping create more pet-friendly domestic violence shelters so survivors and their pets can escape and heal together. Visit Purina.com/purple to learn more.
The Hyundai Getaway Sales Event is on now with awesome deals on their most popular models, including adventure-ready SUVs like the Hyundai Santa Fe and Santa Fe Hybrid. There's also the stylish Elantra, packed with the latest tech. Or go electric with the Ioniq 5 or Ioniq 6. Visit HyundaiUSA.com or call 562-314-4603 for more details. Offers end January 5th, 2026.
Introducing Oakley Meta Vanguard, the new performance AI glasses designed for athletes. With hands-free capture on an action-ready ultra-wide camera, powerful open-ear speakers, and built-in Meta AI that syncs with your Garmin devices for real-time insights while you train. Take your performance to the next level with Oakley Meta Vanguard. Athletic intelligence is here. Learn more on meta.com.
Hello, it's Martin here, and before we get started today, I thought I'd let you know that this episode of Away the Podcast is sponsored by LiveScoreBet, a principal partner of Sunderland AFC. LiveScoreBet is the home of the total betting experience, combining LiveScore's real-time updates and stats with great odds and offers, all in one very slick and very easy-to-use betting app. For more information, visit livescorebet.com or download the LiveScoreBet app. Remember, it's for over 18s only, and please bet responsibly. For more information, go to gambleaware.org. Right, time for the intro music. Hello and welcome to Away the Podcast, sponsored by LiveScoreBet. It's Martin here, and you join us today for another trip down Sunderland memory lane, revisiting some of the highs and some of the not-so-highs of this week in the history of Sunderland Association Football Club. Now, there's no Chris with us this week, but we have got the rest of our usual lineup with us. So first of all, we'll say good morning to Kelvin Beattie. Good morning, Kelvin.
Morning, lads. Morning. Looking forward to blowing off the cobwebs this morning.
Yes, Kelvin's saying that because we had to delay recording for a half an hour as my house got battered by a storm, but it seems to have subsided now. But if I do get blown off course at any point today, that is the reason why. Also with us is Andrew Smithson. Hello, mate.
Morning. Hello, everyone. I was going to complain that I'm coming into this on the back of barely an hour's sleep. But to be fair, you've trumped us, Martin. The possibility of your house blowing away, I think, is slightly more of a concern.
Yeah, well, if my next 3 days have been completely changed. I'm going to have to spend it out in the garden chopping up trees by the looks of things rather than working. But I will cross that bridge when I come to it. And there is plenty of stuff. Yeah, mate.
Martin, if we get blown off course this week, how are we going to know the difference to any other week?
It might be shorter. We'll have to see. That's a test for the listeners, I think, isn't it? And Andrew, you left us with a quiz question at the end of last week's episode.
Yes, cheers, Martin. 7th of December, 1912. So that falls into the week we're covering. We thrashed Liverpool 7-0. But who scored 5 times for us in the game? Any guesses, lads?
I can take a very good guess.
Go on then.
After my research for this week's episode.
Fire away, be my guest.
It's somebody who we've spoken about a couple of times in this podcast, I think, isn't it? It's Mr. Charlie Buchan.
Exactly, yes. Charlie Buchan is somebody we've spoken about a lot. He's a popular character, isn't he? That day in particular, when we beat Liverpool, they were managed by Tom Watson, who was another name that we've mentioned on this pod, somebody with a great Sunderland history. obviously that wasn't the best of returns to Wearside for him. Buchan opened the scoring in the 17th minute. Then Harry Martin and Jackie Mordew got 1-1 before Buchan decided we'll better make sure. Scored in the 43rd, 65th, 71st and 87th minute. The win only put us 10th at that point in time, but we did finish the season as champions, so we were, it seems daft to say after a 7-0 win, but we were starting to head in the right direction. He became the first player to score 5 goals in a league game for us. Jimmy Miller had done it in an FA Cup tie in 1895. And then after him, Bobby Gurney repeated the trick. That was in December 1935. And the only other player to do it for Sunderland thus far was Nick Sharkey in 1963. He scored in a big win over Norwich City. So fair play to all of those lads. That is some going. Five goals in a game when we can probably think of strikers who would have been pleased with 5 goals in a season.
That's right. There's been a few seasons where the strikers would have looked enviously at those particular games, wouldn't they? Excellent. Thank you for that. We'll probably come on to that game in brief in a little while, but we're going to go back to 1888 on December the 1st. Now, this was a friendly match that Sunderland played against Sunderland Albion at Newcastle Road. And Sunderland won 2-0. Arnold Davison and John Breckenridge scored the goals for Sunderland. But it's a really interesting sort of scenario how this game came about. Sunderland and Sunderland Albion were drawn against each other that season, I think, in both the FA Cup and the Durham Challenge Cup. But Sunderland didn't want to play the games because they didn't want Sunderland Albion to benefit financially. So they kind of said, look, we don't want to play these games. We're going to withdraw from the competitions. They did agree to play 2 friendlies after a lot of negotiation on the proviso that the money went to charity. However, when push came to shove, 15,000 people crammed into Newcastle Road to watch the game, and the 2 clubs decided, actually, we're going to share the gate money for this. Bugger the charities, we're going to keep the money. There was gate receipts of £151 for the game, which was a lot of money back in those days. That was shared between the 2 clubs. The second match, which took place in January, the gate receipts did go to charity on that occasion, but that was kind of the compromise for not fulfilling the FA Cup and Durham Challenge Cup fixtures, a friendly that half of the gate receipts at least went to charity. And it tells you about the rivalry that would have been building up at the time between the 2 clubs. Obviously, Sunderland Albion kind of came spurned from the foundation of Sunderland AFC, didn't it? And it must have been a strange situation at the time. Obviously, very early days for Sunderland AFC, and even earlier days for Sunderland Albion.
Mm. To be fair to Albion, they achieved quite a lot in a very short space of time because Sunderland did have that head start and had been growing slowly over the years. Whereas by the time Albion were formed, football was now massive in the town, so they were able to very quickly get up to quite a high standard. I do often think it would be quite odd had Albion continued and if Sunderland had been a 2-team town. That was quite good, a 2-team town.
Especially off an hour's sleep as well, mate.
Yeah, well, exactly, yeah. I was quite pleased with myself for that one. I'm from Sunderland. I've grown up here, lived here all my life. So I love the city as well as the team. And I wonder, had there been a rival in the city, would that change things? One of the things I love about the football club is everybody supports Sunderland, or they at the very least know the score. Would things be a bit different if you went to school or you worked with people who supported a rival side? Would that cause a bit of niggle, maybe? But yeah, it was fascinating, the rivalry, obviously because of the way Albion started as well, and it was from a fallout at Sunderland AFC. There was this problem between the clubs straight away, And I recently did an On This Day for the website, where, as in a little aside to the main story, I touched upon a court case between two fans who were just walking along Fulwell Road one Saturday evening. Turns out one was an Albion fan, one was an AFC fan, and they end up getting in a scuffle. One of them gets a black. One of them gets a black eye. The other lad gets a fine, all because one of them had made an offhand remark about the opposition and said,
right.
"So I've not got it in front of me, but yeah, the Albion fan was critical of Sunderland AFC, and they decided having a little fracas in the street about it. So emotions did run high, and who knows? Maybe Newcastle United wouldn't even gain a second thought. Maybe they're not even, had things been differently, the whole weird time derby might never have been a thing, and it might have been an inter-town rivalry.
Well, it's every possibility, isn't it? It could be like the Borough rivalry if things had gone slightly differently, couldn't it? Maybe we're to blame.
Yeah.
We will move on. 1923. Now, we've mentioned this player a couple of times on episodes, Billy Clunas, because he's Sunderland's record ever penalty goal scorer. He scored 30 penalties throughout his time with the club. Now, he made his debut in a 2-1 win over Huddersfield. He'd only signed a few days before from St Mirren. In this game, Charlie Buchan scored twice on 26 minutes. And then on the 88th minute, it was 1-1. Charlie Buchan scored with a couple of minutes left to seal the victory. Interestingly, given what Billy Clunas went on to do with penalties, in this game, Sunderland missed a penalty. So Billy Ellis had a penalty on 80 minutes to put Sunderland 2-1 up. Somebody was encroaching in the box when he scored the first one, so he had to take it again, and the goalkeeper saved it. It wasn't until about 12 months later that Billy Clunas actually took his first penalty for Sunderland. Another player missed in the March time, and then Ellis missed another penalty a couple of weeks after that. So Clunas didn't get onto penalties until a year after he arrived, but in 272 games for the club, he scored 44 goals, 30 of which were penalties. He missed 3. So while he has got the record for the most number of penalties scored, he hasn't got the best ratio.
Completion record, yeah.
Yeah, so
yeah.
I think he's on 92% or something. I think Gary Rowell and Tony Towers have slightly better ratios. Now, 1925, so a couple of years later, Sunderland broke the British transfer record. They paid £6,550 for an England international forward. You play inside right or outside right, called Bob Kelly. Now, Kelvin, you'd like this chap because he was 5'5", a small, diminutive little forward. But he was 32 when we signed him for this British club record. And he's another player who, I think we talked a couple of weeks ago, weren't we, about these players who lost chunks of their career during the war. And this was another case of that. So he'd lost a big chunk of his career during the First World War. But he scored 15 goals in 54 games. He wasn't massively successful at Sunderland. He spent 2 years with us. He had played 14 times for England, scoring 8 goals when we signed him. But he's recognised as Burnley's greatest ever player. He scored 88 in 275 games for them. And interestingly, he didn't play football at all until after he'd left school. He'd never kicked a ball. And then somehow he found out, I'm all right at this. But after he left Sunderland, so, we signed him at 32. So he left Sunderland 2 years later, 34 years old. He went to Huddersfield. He played 186 games for Huddersfield, scored 39 goals. And Huddersfield were a top team at the time. There's another lot of teas there for you, Andrew. He played in the FA Cup finals, which Huddersfield lost in 1928 and 1930. He then went on to Preston and played 78 times, scoring 17 for Preston. He went to be player manager of Carlisle, and he was manager of Stockport. And then World War II happened. So his career got interrupted by both the First World War and the Second World War. But interestingly, after World War II, he was manager of Sporting Lisbon. So he managed Sporting Lisbon. Then he went over to Switzerland and was manager of St. Gallen, and went over to the Netherlands and was manager of Heerenveen. So he had an international managerial career after he'd finished his playing career. I thought it was quite an interesting little story because it's punctuated by the two wars like we've spoken about previously. But this was a player who I'd never really heard much about before. But he's got such a strong reputation at Burnley. It'd be like Burnley's Charlie Buchan or Rach Carter or Bobby Gurney or somebody like that. So he had a couple of years at Sunderland. And wasn't as maybe successful as they thought he might be, but went on to have a good managerial career across Europe after World War II. Now, we talked about Billy Clunas just a minute or two ago, and in 1928, Sunderland beat Leeds 3-0 at Elland Road. Billy Clunas scored 2 penalties, and Dave Halliday got the other goal as we won 3-0. And in 1952, on the 1st of December, we played a friendly at Southampton, and Tommy Wright scored a hat-trick. It was a 3-2 win. Do either of you know what was remarkable or memorable or noteworthy about this game?
1952.
Yeah.
Tommy Wright scores a hat-trick.
3-2 win in a friendly on the 1st of December over Southampton.
I think a certain A. Smithson might have written about this. So I'll let Kelvin think while I try and see if I can dig that out.
I've got no idea.
No.
It's not ringing a bell with me.
It was the first time that we ever played under floodlights in the UK.
Right.
So it must have been a friendly match to unveil Southampton's floodlights, and we spoiled the party.
That is very good of you to shed some light on that, Martin. Thank you.
That is my role in life, Kelvin. That is quite right. 1954, England played West Germany in a game at Wembley, and Len Shackleton scored a goal in a 3-1 win. Now, I think, if I am correct, that was the last time a Sunderland player scored for England until Jermaine Defoe got one against Lithuania in 2017. So it was an awfully long time between goals for Sunderland players. Kevin Phillips should have been given more of a chance to get one, but that's another story altogether. 1984, Paul Lemon made his debut against Aston Villa as a sub for Dave Hodgson. We lost that game in the 84th minute to a Paul Rideout goal. And in 2001, Kevin Phillips, there you go, bang on cue, scored the only goal at the Stadium of Light as we beat West Ham 1-0. And in 2007, Sunderland beat Derby 1-0 at home. Now, I think this was this coming off the back of that Everton trouncing? And Craig Gordon had dropped down the bench. Darren Ward came in to play in goal. Carlos Edwards, I think, broke his leg in that game too. But Anthony Stokes came off the bench and scored a winner in the last minute to get a vital 1-0 win.
Anthony Stokes, I believe, in the aftermath, I think this was the game where Roy Keane had a bit of a go at him for drinking in a pub in town called the Glass Spider.
Yeah.
And obviously, as Stokes' career went on, I think there was a few times where he might have been better served stopping in the house and watching a film or watching the TV instead of going out on the drink. But I think Roy Keane could sense that he maybe needed a bit of guidance. Sadly, it didn't work. But yes, Darren Ward played well, and it was a scrappy late goal. Was that the year when Derby were awful and broke our... Yeah.
I think he got 12 points or something, didn't he?
Oh, dear, mate.
He was a Marmite kind of player, Anthony Stokes, wasn't he? Yeah, he would do something in a game and you would think, "Wow, he's got something, him." And then he'd disappear for 80 minutes or something, you think, "Wow, God, gets his money easy, that lad." But,
no, he was potentially a really good player. And if you remember, I think Niall Quinn tried to get him on loan from Arsenal when Quinn took over as manager for that period. And instead of joining us, he went to Falkirk. And he ripped it up at Falkirk, didn't he? He was scoring all sorts of goals in the Premier League, in the Scottish Premier League. And then when by that time Keane had come in, and we managed to get him from Arsenal rather than staying at Falkirk. But I think, events have subsequently proven he needed he would have benefited from a firmer hand, I think, anyway, wouldn't he? But he, potentially would have been a very good player.
What was the name of the pub he got into trouble for going to, Andrew?
Dare I say it? It was the Glass Spider.
Oh, right. Keane's probably seen that on the web then, has he, that he's been in there?
Do you want to hazard a guess as to why it was called the Glass Spider, gents?
I haven't got a clue.
It's got a Sunderland AFC link.
Right.
The Glass Spider, that was the name of the tour David Bowie
Bowie's
was
tour.
doing when he
right.
performed at Roker Park and made his infamous, what was it? Hello Newcastle.
Hello Durham or something like that, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Hello Silksworth.
Yeah. So yes, there's another little Sunderland link, and if you want more information, as Kelvin says, you can read up about it on the web. Very good, Kelvin. Very sharp.
He's on form today, isn't he?
Aye.
I'm always good at this time of the morning, but once it gets to 7:30, it's a problem.
Well, we'll move swiftly on. December the 2nd, 1933, Sunderland played Middlesbrough. We beat them 4-0 at Ayresome Park. Patsy Gallagher got a hat-trick and Rach Carter got the other goal. 1950, Sunderland played Stoke. Billy Bingham made his debut in that game. It was a 1-1 draw. Billy Bingham went on to score 227. So he played 227 games and score 47 goals. 1961, we had a game away at St James's Park. We drew 2-2 with Brian Clough getting 2 goals. And in 1978, Wayne Entwistle scored his only hat-trick for Sunderland as we beat Bristol Rovers 5-0 at Roker Park. Bob Lee and Gary Rowell got the other 2. 11 years later, in 1989, Sunderland drew 2-2 with Swindon. We were losing 2-1 going into the last minute. Gordon Armstrong had got our goal, and Thomas Hauser came on as sub and scored a last-minute equaliser for us in that game. And I think that was another time the newspapers rolled out the German sub sinks somebody headline. 2003, we played a home game against Wigan at the Stadium of Light. 22,167 people were at the Stadium of Light that night for the draw against Wigan. Julio Arca was sent off and Stuart Downing scored a penalty as we drew 1-1. And in 2006, we played a home game against Norwich. Now, Daryl Murphy scored our goal, but there was 2 players with Sunderland links in the Norwich team. I think one would have been future, one would have been past.
So if that was 2006, maybe Dixon Atuhu? We
Correct,
signed
that's one of
him.
them.
Good shout. Yeah.
He must have played well on that day then, presumably, and caught Sunderland's eye, I'm guessing. But the other one, you think that one was a former?
That was a former Sunderland player, yes.
Oh. No, he hadn't. Chris Brown hadn't left at that point, had he?
No, midfielder, another midfield player.
Ooh.
Mm.
Is this one of these where there'll be people shouting at their speakers
not many.
Not many. Quite a tricky one.
It's quite a tricky one. I'll give you a clue. We signed him initially on loan under Mick McCarthy, and then that got converted to a permanent transfer. He was one of the players who McCarthy kind of discarded when we went up.
Carl Robinson?
Correct, Carl Robinson.
Right. Okay.
Yeah,
well done,
Andrew. Yeah.
Not a bad player, Carl Robinson.
No, I thought he was quite underrated. I thought he was pretty effective, wasn't he?
Yeah.
We will take a short break. We'll be back very soon.
This episode is brought to you by Casamigos Tequila. What do you bring to a holiday party? Simple. A bottle of Casamigos. Because nothing gets the party started like a Casamigos margarita, which isn't just for summer. In fact, it's the perfect pour all year round. Casamigos is the gift that always feels right. Because anything goes with my Casamigos. Please drink responsibly. Imported by Casamigos Spirits Company, White Plains, New York. Casamigos Tequila, 40% alcohol by volume.
This episode is brought to you by Nature's Bounty. Nature's Bounty believes your body is brilliant, naturally designed to thrive, inside and out. For those always looking for new ways to support your health from head to heels, Nature's Bounty has a range of over 400 vitamins and supplements born from 50 years of trust and care. Nature's Bounty. It's in your nature. Visit naturesbounty.com to learn more.
Welcome back to Away the podcast, sponsored by LiveScore Bet. And you join us for another episode of On This Week, and we are on December the 3rd. Now, 1887, Sunderland played their first ever FA Cup replay. We were 2-0 down against Middlesbrough, and we came back to beat them 4-2. Tam Halliday scored 2, Arnold Davidson got 1, and there was no goal. However, even though we won, we didn't play any more games in that competition because we were disqualified, because we fielded 3 professional players, and Middlesbrough objected after the game. So we fielded chaps called Hastings, Monaghan, and Richardson, and apparently they were professional players and we weren't supposed to play them. So yeah, Middlesbrough took objection and we were out of the FA Cup.
I can think of a few times in recent seasons where I don't think we had 3 professional players on the pitch.
It's loosely termed, isn't it?
Yeah. No, it was just a little joke. It was in jest. It wasn't meant to upset any of our former players.
No, not too much anyway. 1892, Johnny Campbell scored a hat-trick as Sunderland beat Nottingham Forest 5-0 at the Town Ground. Now, this was Forest's previous ground. They played at the Town Ground before moving to the City Ground in 1898, and I didn't realise that they'd gone from town to city. I did wonder initially whether they'd actually changed the name if Nottingham had become a city and they changed the name of the ground, but no, it's 2 different grounds. But the interesting thing about the Town Ground, it was the first ground in England to host a football match using crossbars and nets.
Oh, that's a good one,
isn't it? I thought it was quite a nice little aside to Nottingham Forest at the Town Ground. Yes, but they moved to the City Ground in 1898. That was a great season for us. Obviously, this was the era of the team of all talents, and we scored 5 goals or more in 9 of 30 league games that season as we retained the First Division title. Scored over 100 goals, or 100 goals exactly that season. Would have been an entertaining season. You got your money's worth that season, wouldn't you?
That would do me.
Be all right, wouldn't it? Now, 1960, we had a game at Roker Park, Andrew, against Ipswich. And I think we came out victorious in a 2-0 win.
Correct, yes. Good home win against Ipswich. The starting 11 that day, and the finishing 11 as well, actually, as I think about it, because it was in the days, in the days before substitutes. There's a couple of big Sunderland names in this lineup. Peter Wakeham played in goal. Colin Nelson and Len Ashurst were in front of him. Then you've got the halfbacks of Stan Anderson, Charlie Hurley and Jim McNabb. Across the front for Sunderland, it was Harry Hooper, Ambrose Fogarty, Ian Lawther, Willie McFeet and Jack Overfield. So that is, as I say, pretty packed out with big names. There's a lot of names we've spoken about in the past. On the day, that side were performing in front of 21,251 fans. As I mentioned at the top there, it was a good win for us. It put us 9th in the table. And this season, 1960-61, was when Sunderland finally looked as if they were getting to grips with Division 2 and they weren't quite in the promotion race, but they were at least at the right end of the table. They were one of the stronger sides, whereas the campaigns before that, since relegation, we'd taken a while to really settle in Division 2. I think we'd been in Division 1 for so long before that. It was a massive culture shock for everybody at the club. It took a lot of getting used to. But as I say, things were starting to look a little bit better. This particular game was a really good performance from Sunderland. And I'll just read through the first couple of lines from the match report in the following day, Sunday Sun, just to give you an idea of how well they did. Alan Sleeman started by saying, "The heat is on at Roker, and I'll wager this, the next team to leave Sunderland with a point will be wearing asbestos outfits. If I'd thought on, I would have actually looked at what the next who the next team were to come to Sunderland, but that must have been pretty ominous for them. So yes, believe me, Alan Brown's boys were in blistering form. Ipswich could only look on helplessly as Sunderland's forwards, fanned on by a half-back line in brilliant form, smouldered threateningly for 45 minutes. Then, suddenly and violently, apparently, they burst into flame. Twice within 6 minutes, young Scotsman Willie McFeet hammered home goals from 20 yards. So we were talking there about how we'd be quite happy with a season of 100 league goals. I think fans on that day must have been pretty impressed by the team. That's quite glowing terms there, the report. The 2 goals. First one after 54 minutes, Ambrose Fogarty took a quick free kick near the halfway line. It's collected by McFeet, who just basically looks up, ploughs forward. There's 2 men sliding in to tackle him. So before they get to the ball, he just thinks, right, well, I'll fire it into the net from 20 yards and save them the bother of trying to block the shot. I'll just get a quick shot in. Then, 6 minutes later, as suggested in the report, McFeet has another long-range shot. That's with his right foot. The ball absolutely cannons off the woodwork, and without him having to move, it comes straight back to him. And this time he says, all right, well, that right foot shot wasn't quite good enough. I'll just hit it in with my left foot instead. And it flies in. So quite a remarkable goal, really. I can't think of many instances where the ball's come that far out and the player who's taken the first shot's able to just say, oh, well, I'll have another crack. But yeah, two quality goals to give us the win. As the report comes to an end, the journalist sums up and mentions a few of the players who played well, a few of the moments that were influential. What he's written was Jimmy Ledbetter and Roy Stevenson, who were 2 Ipswich players, obviously, sent over a generous supply of floating centres. But then Len Ashurst and Colin Nelson got to grips with these 2 tormentors, and that was the end of Ipswich. So that's not good, not bad going from Ashurst and Nelson. And that was the reason why I picked this game. I think you both saw this last week, gents, and I'm sure a lot of listeners will have spotted that sadly Colin Nelson passed away. Felt like a good time to just look at a game where he's played well. That season, he was an ever-present, and this performance against Ipswich kind of sums how he was during the campaign. Just a really, really consistent, solid defender. We've kept a clean sheet against Ipswich, who at the time were one of the stronger sides. I think they were 4th in the division at the point of kickoff. So Colin Nelson's really important part of the team. Other than that, though, he sometimes had to drop in and out of the team, but it wasn't necessarily because of his form or any feelings that he couldn't get up to the grade. He was training and then working as a pharmacist alongside his football career, and very often the two things would clash, and he would maybe have to drop out of the side, and then it would be hard for him to get back into the team. Just fascinating. We often talk, don't we, about players from that era who had to have a second job to supplement their income. Where with this, I think if you're a pharmacist, I would imagine the pay for that's better than a professional footballer. So the football's the job that you do on the side. If anybody gets a chance, there's a really good obituary of him on the official club website, and it starts with a fantastic photo of Nelson playing at Roker Park in front of a jam-packed clock stand. It's honestly, it's a It's a stunning photo. Nelson, as I say, would often spend his Saturday mornings. This was before he qualified as a pharmacist. He would spend his Saturday mornings studying in Newcastle. I believe now Sunderland University's got a very good pharmacy department, so things might have been different if he was studying in Sunderland. But at the time, what he would have to do is he would have to pack away his textbooks, jump on the bus from Newcastle, and then get off at the Grange, which is still there now. The Grange pub's popular on a match day, even though we've moved to the stadium of late. And he would walk from the Grange pub to the game. We've mentioned before, I think Craig Russell and one or two other players have had to get the bus to go to a match, and there's probably people sat next to them thinking, this kid looks a bit familiar. I'm sure I recognise him. So just he was a fella of many talents. He apparently went in goal once. This was something we spoke about last week. Jimmy Montgomery was injured in a game in January 1963. It was a League Cup semi-final. And it's Nelson that puts his hand up and goes in goal and replaces Montgomery. He was apparently a really good cricketer too, played at quite a high level in the Northeast. So yeah, just this fella who just took everything on with such verve and achieved really good standards. I'm going to, if I may, just read a couple of lines about him from the souvenir brochure that Sunderland brought out in 1964 when we finally got our first ever promotion. Born in East Bolden, Colin played his early football with Washington Grammar School's under 12, under 15 and senior teams. On leaving school, he joined Usworth Juniors, who swept everything before them. Was invited to Roker Park by the late Bill Murray, but originally declined an invitation to sign because he had set his heart on pharmacy as a career, and this entailed working on Saturdays. On going to college in 1957, however, he then actually applied for a trial shortly after Alan Brown had taken over as manager and was accepted and signed on, but only as a part-timer in 1958. After qualifying as a pharmacist, he continued as a part-timer until the beginning of this year. So it was January 1964 when he signed a full-time agreement. And Colin himself has said, having only been a reserve for most of the season, may I add my congratulations to the lads, a great bunch who have brought this honour to themselves and the club on the field this season. So he's also he's a humble fella as well. During that promotion season, he only played 3 games. Again, the team was very settled. You didn't have substitutes, so it was harder to force your way back into the setup. But there he is, humble, happy for his teammates to have won promotion. He just comes across as a really good fella. This article in the promotion souvenir, hobbies. He's been asked to list his hobbies. Cricket, bowling, and a little bit of pharmacy now and again.
Yeah, you could take that a number of ways, mate. Hey. Just one of the old worthies on the bus, Andrew, is was friendly with Colin Nelson. He knew him, and I haven't seen him since we got the news of Colin Nelson passed. But I remember him telling us a story about him. But I will back up. Obviously, I'm relaying stories as told to me here. He said that he's a lovely, he was a lovely, humble guy. You know, really a nice guy. But he also said, you know, when he was part-time, he's rolling up to the game on a Saturday morning, and he used to keep his books and his boots and his briefcase. So he'd be wandering up to the ground with the briefcase from the studies and the boots in the briefcase. Allegedly kept his boots and and his briefcase. Yeah, and went to Mansfield as well. He had
did.
C. Sherwin. He'd no sooner won the right back berth in that team, and another young pretender came along, and C. Sherwin, who was much younger than him. I think C. Sherwin was 16 when he played his debut, but he was there almost right from the start of Colin Nelson winning the right back berth from Jack Headley. C. Sherwin's bubbling away underneath him there, so he had competition right from the off. But he always sounds, whenever that lad, the older boy, gets on about him, he always just sounds like a really, really canny lad, a canny lad.
Yeah, that is exactly how he's come across to me as well. Lovely fella, very talented. He was born on March the 13th, 1938. And as I say, he's only just passed away recently. So, yeah, it was just nice to look back on him there and pick out a couple of his achievements. And obviously, our thoughts are with his loved ones and anybody who remembers watching him play firsthand.
No, absolutely, yes. Always good to remember. It's obviously a sad occasion, but it's nice. That gives you an opportunity to look back and dig into some more of this sort of stuff, isn't it? To remember all of these people who've kind of formed the rich tapestry of the club that we all love. Now, 17 years after that game, we talked about Wayne Entwistle scoring a hat-trick in 1978. On this day in 1977, so what are we on? We are on December the 3rd. 1977, Wayne Entwistle made his debut. It was an away game at Charlton, and he actually scored on the 40th minute to make it 2-1. Roy Greenwood had already scored for us, but we ended up losing that game 3-2. 2 years later, Claudio Marangoni became the first Argentinian to join the club when he signed from San Lorenzo. We've talked about him a couple of times in recent weeks, but at the time it was a club record £380,000 fee. Now, 1983, there was another game against Ipswich. We drew 1-1 at Roker Park. Gary Rowell equalised for us on 44. Remember who scored Ipswich's goal that day, Kelvin?
Ooh.
Repeat the year, please, Martin.
1983.
Oh, okay.
Was it George Burley?
It wasn't. It was Eric Gates. A little bit easier.
Ooh, that's he was like Leighton James. Him when he was always dropping to the floor, and you'd be hollering and bawling at him and telling him to get up, and then he comes and plays for us, and we'll love him.
Yeah, very, very easily turned
James. He was like Leighton James. Yeah, absolutely. Him and Leighton James just, always winning free kicks, always, and the crowd are going at them, Aye, lad.
Well, 5 years later, Eric Gates was on the bench as Watford came to Roker Park. It was a 1-1 draw. Tim Sherwood scored for Watford just before half-time. John McPhail scored a penalty on 60 minutes, but then had another penalty on 78 to put us in the lead. Tony Courton saved it, so the game ended 1-1. Now, if you're kind of joining dots here, as we like to, we talked about our record penalty goal scorer earlier, Billy Clunas. Now, he held the record for the most number of goals scored by a non-striker for Sunderland until John McPhail beat it in 87-88. So it's always nice to join a few little things together, but there you go. John McPhail had a very successful penalty record in his first season at Roker Park, but then he tailed off a little bit after that. But speaking of penalties, 1995, Martin Scott scored a penalty to give us a 1-0 win over Crystal Palace at Roker Park. And in 2016, Sunderland beat Leicester 2-1. This was one of those rare David Moyes wins. Jermaine Defoe got one of the goals and Robert Huth scored no own goals. We beat Leicester at the Stadium of Light. 2022, we also beat a team in blue, this time Millwall. And this was Tony Mowbray's Sunderland, and Ahmad, Alex Pritchard and Ellis Sims all got second half goals as we beat the Lions. We tamed the Lions, as you might say. We'll take another short break there. We'll be back very soon.
The Who's down in Who Newville were making their list, but some didn't know Walmart has the best brands for their gifts.
What about toys? Do they have brands kids have been wanting all year?
Yep, Barbie, Tony's, and Lego. Gifts that will make them all cheer.
Do you mean they have all the brands I adore?
They have Nintendo, Nespresso, Apple, and more.
What about...
So the Who answered questions from friends till they were blue. Each one listened and shouted, from Walmart? Who knew? Shop gifts from top brands for everyone on your list in the Walmart app.
This episode is presented by State Farm. Having insurance isn't the same as having State Farm. It's like needing the protection of an offensive guard on the football field, but getting an elementary school crossing guard. Sure, they're both guards, but you can only trust one to keep your quarterback safe when the game is on the line. So don't settle for just any insurance when there's State Farm. Like a good neighbor, State Farm is there.
Welcome back to Away, the podcast sponsored by LiveScore Bet. You are joining us for another episode one this week, and we are in the first week in December, and we are on December the 4th, and we're going all the way back to 1909, when Sunderland had a 3-0 home win over Manchester United. Goals from Harry Lowe and 2 from George Holly gave us the points on that particular day at Roker Park. 1961, former Sunderland captain Gary Bennett was born in Manchester. And in 1982, now we talked about a game against Ipswich just a little while ago. And who scored the Ipswich goal, Kelvin?
Eric Gates.
Well, on this occasion, Eric Gates on the score sheet again. We got beat on Frank Worthington's debut. Eric Gates got one. Alan Brazil got the other 2 goals. And Ian Atkins and Frank Worthington got our goals. It was a 3-2 win to Ipswich. Now, 1993, we played Portsmouth away at Fratton Park, 1-1-0. Martin Smith scored the goal for Mick Buxton's side. And in 1999, this was the game against Chelsea, where we absolutely took them apart in the first half, didn't we? We'd opened the season up against them and got turned over at Stamford Bridge, and this seemed to be a sort of turning point in our season that year, wasn't it? Because we picked up form, we'd got a number of wins under our belt and all that sort of stuff. But getting a bit of revenge on Chelsea seemed to be the next thing we had to do, that next hurdle we had to overcome. And from memory, we went into the game with pretty decimated in midfield. Paul Thirlwell, Eric Roy both started in midfield, I think. 4-0 up at half-time, Kelvin. Absolutely fantastic game, wasn't it?
It's just memorable for a number of reasons. All of those goals were very, very good goals. I can remember sitting in the stand. I was actually in the Roker end, or the south stand, right behind the goal with my son, my young son, was at that game, and looking at the team and thinking, oh, bloody hell, we've got too many players missing here from the midfield. I thought Chelsea were favourites going into that game. I wasn't that hopeful, and probably would have settled for a draw with having me boy there. I just didn't want us to lose. The 4-0 half time. Just before the game kicked off, this old fella comes in and takes his seat behind us, and I swear to God, he must have been in his 80s. He had a stick. It took him ages, and he was sitting right in the middle of the row as well. Nothing had been sort of worked out for him. He sat himself down. We sort of gave him a little bit of a hand to get settled in his seat, me and the boy. The game kicks off, it's 4-0. We're apoplectic, you just, and I turns around with my boy to see if he's all right. I says, how are you doing? What do you think of that? And he looks at us, he says, by Christ, lad, if our lass was alive, she'd be in for a right good night tonight.
Brilliant.
Of course, my boy's next to is, just the wrong age for anything like that. What does he mean, Dad? What does he mean? All right, good night. What are they going to do? So I should remember all the goals, but that isn't really what I remember about that. If I could paint, I could draw that boy's face and him saying that to us. My boy's 40 now, and he still tells that story. Yeah, still tells it.
But does he still ask what the old boy meant? Kelvin, I
Well,
hope you finally explained it to him.
He's got 3 kids of his own now, so I think he does know what
he's worked it out.
Yeah. Were they all 9 months after famous Sunderland victories as well, were they, Kelvin? Is that what you're trying to say?
Man. What a half of football, though. When you watch it back, you're there. You'll have had this sort of experience yourself. You're at the game. You've experienced it. You've Billy Big bollocksed it up with everybody. What that team I support. We're the lads. Okay, we're going to win the league. And then you watch the game back and you think it's even better.
Yeah.
When you watch it back than what you remember it being. We absolutely tonked them. It was brilliant.
And we have to remember the Fancy Night in Love. We'll put the Chelsea match on.
Personally, I prefer the Pearl Fishers from his background music, but
we will move very swiftly on. Of course, Gus Poyet scored Chelsea's goal in that second half, I think, to make it 4-1, but it was still a very, very good day, especially in certain households. Year 2000, the year after that, we beat Everton 2-0 at home. A little bit less memorable game, but Alex Ray and Kevin Phillips scored our goals. And in 2008, on December the 4th, Roy Keane left Sunderland after 100 games in charge. I think we've spoken a bit about Roy Keane and that Bolton game we covered in last week's episode, didn't we, briefly? But it was a bit of a sad way for Keane's tenure as Sunderland manager to end. Ricky Sprazier took over the reins after that, I think initially as caretaker, didn't he? And there was all sorts of rumours about Sam Allardyce coming in and other people, but Quinny eventually gave him the job I think it was kind of a permanent basis till the end of the season, wasn't it? But then it all fizzled out a little bit. 2013, so December 4th, 2013, there was another game against Chelsea, the Stadium Light. We scored 3 goals this time, but unfortunately we conceded 4. But it was a pretty memorable game for somebody. Can anybody remember who and why? Obviously, somebody related to Sunderland, and it wasn't the old boy Kelvin was talking to a few years earlier, or his wife. 2013, sorry.
13. Ooh. Oh, that's chundering away at the back of my mind there. Nah, that's not going to come.
Josie Altidore scored a league goal for Sunderland. A very, very memorable occasion.
Why are we wasting our time talking about all these other events? It should just be a 3-hour special pod on that magnificent moment.
Because we have got far, far, far more important things to talk about, because December the 5th, 1908. All I need to say is 9-1. And everybody listening to this will know what we're talking about, surely, won't they?
Oh, hey, 9-1. 9-1. We beat Newcastle, 9-1, December the 5th.
Sorry, Kelvin, what did you say?
We beat Newcastle 9-1.
9-1?
9-1. 9. N-I-N-E. 9-1. It was what a score. What a score. And what a game as well. Both teams, just to give a bit of background, both teams were up at the top of the league. I think Newcastle were second and we were fifth. comparatively speaking, both teams had spent a lot of money on their teams. Newcastle had a debutant playing that day, a lad called Albert Shepherd, who they bought from Bolton. England international, centre forward, goal scorer, fearsome reputation this lad had, and Newcastle spent a comparatively huge whopping sum of £800 on him, and he did actually score a penalty in this game, so he did get Newcastle's goal. And his history with Newcastle, he does actually score quite a few goals against us in other games, but he doesn't. He only gets one in this game. Sunderland, we had an international forward line at that time, as well as sprinkled with internationals throughout the rest of the team. But it was our forward line that took the plaudits in this game. We had Arthur Bridget, Billy Hogg, and Arthur Brown, who were current internationals, and Jackie Mordew and George Hollywood would soon be capped by England. And that was our forward line. On the day, Newcastle, they could actually afford to have 4 internationalists playing in their reserves. That's how well stocked Newcastle were. They had 4 internationalists who couldn't get in the team and were playing in the reserve team. This result, we've just been talking about games in, 2019 Canteen and all that. This result stood as a record away win till 2019 when Leicester beat Southampton 9-0. I think I cannot. One of you two might know there was a team in the 50s. There was a game that equaled this, but I at the moment I cannot remember. I cannot remember who equaled it, and to be frank, don't care. We won this one 9-1. We're the boys. I'll run you through the goals very, very quickly because there's a lot of them. Yeah. And we need to try and get finished by lunchtime. So we're on 8 minutes. Billy Hogg got a ball on halfway, went past one Mag player after another as he made a beeline for the goal. He then beats the keeper Lawrence with a low shot to make it 1-0. On 44 minutes, now the first half's nearly finished here and it's just 1-0. On 44 minutes, just coming into half-time, the referee awards a really controversial penalty at Newcastle. And every report I read about this talked about how controversial it was. I think I looked at about 4 or 5 different newspaper reports about it, and they all said the same thing. And Captain Charlie Thompson, he was apoplectic about it, swore that he'd never touched the ball with his hand. But the ref gave the pen, and Shepherd scores to make it 1-1. Just going into half time, he puts the ball past L.R. Roos. We had characters all over our team, and we had the character known as Lee Roos playing in goals for us that day. But he can't stop the pen. The team come out in the second half, and there's a number of newspaper reports that say that Sunderland took the field looking with their danders up, looking pretty upset about this penalty. So they emerge for the second half, and 48 minutes in we are, and Arthur Bridget goes on a brilliant run, 3/4 of the length of the pitch, and puts in a great cross. And the Newcastle defender, who delights in the name of Puddin', clears, but it goes straight to George Holly, who blasts the ball back and into the net to make it 2-1. 58 minutes, Sunderland are now dominant. Billy Hogg gets in behind the Mag defence and runs the ball into the goal in what sounds like quite a shithousery kind of way. He puts it in and has a bit swagger on it. It's 3-1. 63 minute. Holly again dribbles between two Newcastle defenders and scores from close range. It's now 4-1. 67 minutes from a Mordieu cross. Holly slams the ball past Lawrence in the Newcastle goal for his hat-trick to make it 5-1. 69 minutes, Bridget completely wrong foots Whitson before turning and firing a long-range shot that flies in. Arthur Bridget had a liking for a shot, but they either went into the back of the goal or you were ducking at the back of the Roker end if you were playing there. There didn't seem to be any half measures with them, but this one flies in. And that's 69 minutes, and I am making a point here about this. So on 69 minutes, the player that he completely wrong-footed had to leave the field, this lad Whitson. It's just sometimes when you talk to Newcastle fans about this game, some of them will say, we had two players that were injured and there was no subs, and you played against 9 men. So we're on 70 minutes and it's 6-1, and that's when they lose their first man. So shut your pusses. 71 minutes, Bridget. He scores again with another long-range shot that gives Lawrence no chance. And that makes it 7-1. On 73 minutes, Jackie Mordieu decides he'll have a bit of what Bridget's up to, and he has a long-range shot and buries the ball in the corner of the net for what was described as a cracking, a cannonball of a shot. And then on 76 minutes, the score's 8-1. 76 minutes, Billy Hogg, who opened the scoring, plays a sharp 1-2 and a dribble to breach the Mag defence again to complete his hat-trick. And it's the second hat-trick of the game. The score's 9-1. Sunderland ease up for the last 14 minutes, and in the 89th minute, Duncan's carried off the pitch. Newcastle defender Duncan's carried off the pitch to leave them with 9 men for a minute, and a 9-1 defeat. But they were well beat long before losing any man. In a reserve match, some funny little things around this game. There's a reserve match going on at Roker Park. And the scores being announced to the gathered crowd, and the crowd are cheering every goal until they get to 5, and the crowd start to think, hang on a minute, there's somebody's taking that test here, and they threatened the guy, the scoreboard chappie, and they threatened to wreck the scoreboard if he doesn't stop taking the P. So they're just not believing the score. To put a little context on this incredible result, Sunderland would finish the season in third position that year, and it was their best finish since they won the title in 1902. But Newcastle went on to win the title that year, so we beat the champions that year 9-1. And not only did we beat them 9-1 at their place, we took them back to ours later on in the season and beat them 3-1. And we came back from 1-0 down to beat them. The press reports on this one were really interesting. I was laughing my head off at a couple of them. You tend to think that in this era of social media and stuff like that things can be really horrible. There's some horrible things said, but by God, the press didn't miss you back then as well, But I'll read it. Here's a bit of the national press, the Daily Express. But for sheer amusement, we have known nothing like the result at Newcastle for years. The United were simply swamped. When the result was first known, everybody not at St. James's Park assumed that Newcastle must have had half their team crippled. But no, the result was due absolutely to the remarkable form of Sunderland. Surely this is the greatest performance ever known in football. And that was the Daily Express. The Athletic News, they took a kind of a scientific view of the game. Sunderland were far the heavier team. Ooh, a little bit of analysis going on there. And they suffused the grey scene and the dark surroundings with their daredevil dash. They intended to win, and considering the holding treacherous turf, they maintained a pace and an energy that were tributes to their training. Such wholeheartedness was delightful, and the work of their wing forwards was positively thrilling. That was the Athletic News. You'd take that for your team, wouldn't you? The local press, they didn't pull any punches. So the Football Echo, here we go. As to the cause of the collapse of the Newcastle team, it was quite evidently due to their being useless as a combination. So, no prisoner spared. I wonder what the Football Echo was saying by the end of the season, but so there you go, guys. 9-1. And I'm going to say something I quite often say on here. I wish I'd seen that one.
No, absolutely. And you mentioned Lee Richmond Roos, who's in goal for Sunderland. I know if you spotted this as well, Kelvin. I was looking through the Football Echo from that night, and there was a little piece on Lee Richmond Roos. And I know we talked about him a couple of months ago, and I'm not going to go too far into him, but I found this really interesting, and it kind of sums up, and I think it sort of encapsulates the type of goalkeeper and player he was. So it said, Lee Richmond Roos is probably the most extraordinary goalkeeper we've ever had in football. Roos, if he were tied down, could not explain any one of his methods. They are just the methods of Roos, and they are his greatness. He is always Roos, and he is without a superior. No shot is impossible in his way of thinking, no danger too great to run. How good a write-up's that?
Well, man, you'd say I'd take that. On him, I hadn't realised. It doesn't specifically pertain to this game, Chris, but seeing as you've mentioned him, Martin, as you've mentioned him, they changed the rules of the game for goalkeepers because of him. At that time, goalkeepers could come out of their box and handle anywhere, and they changed the rules because he was running all over the bloody pitch. And he just didn't stay in his goals. Yeah. He would come out, he'd be on the halfway line, he'd be picking the ball up and throwing it, and they ended up changing the rules because he just was so maverick with them. He just sounds such an absolute character, doesn't he? And it's I will say on this day, I think that comes out today. I've got an article about Tim Coleman, who played in the same team as Roos.
Yeah, right.
And Tim Coleman had the reputation of being the biggest joker and prankster in football. And when you think of all the antics Roos got up to, that must have been some bloody dressing room to be in. I would have loved to have been in that dressing room, man. Yeah. Fantastic characters, fantastic, and fantastic game, 9-1. We'll take that. It was a record till 2019 for an away win. Fantastic.
Brilliant stuff. And yes, the article on Tim Coleman that Kelvin is referring to, if you have a look on rokerreport.sbnation.com on 26th of November, you will find that on this day piece. I'm looking forward to reading that when we finish recording. 1925, we spoke about Bob Kelly earlier. He made his debut against Manchester United as Sunderland won 2-1 with 2 goals from Dave Halliday. And in 1936, we beat Grimsby at home 5-1. Bobby Gurney, Connor, Duns, and 2 for Rach Carter sealed the 5-1 win. Now, in 1984, this was a game at White Hart Lane, the League Cup 4th round replay. And it's remembered, I think, for Chris Turner's penalty save with goals from Clive Walker and Gordon Chisholm. It ensured that 2-1 victory. I think it was Graham Roberts who missed whose penalty Chris Turner saved. Anybody who has listened to this podcast before knows how highly Kelvin thinks of Chris Turner. He's all right.
Top man, top goalie.
Excellent. Now, last week we talked about Sunderland's trip to Exeter in 1989, and it was a 2-2 draw. There was a few incidents afterwards. The lads had a good night out in, what was Exeter's party zone or something called? The Exeter nightlife was...
Clubland.
Exeter's Clubland. That's right. Thank you very much. Well, Exeter's players, I think, must have had a night or two out in Exeter's Clubland in between the first game and the replay, because Sunderland took them back to Roker Park and won 5-2. Colin Pascoe, Gordon Armstrong, Paul Hardiman, and 2 from Eric Gates got us over the line.
Reputedly, they were spotted in the Glass Spider.
Was that before or after the game? Who knows? Now then, 1991, Sunderland broke their transfer record. Dennis Smith signed Don Goodman from West Bromwich Albion for £900,000. 1992, this was a game at home against Barnsley, and I think Mickey Gray had made his debut the week before as a sub against Derby. But in the very opening stage of this game, I think 40-odd seconds gone, Sunderland were attacking the full end. The ball broke out to Mickey Gray on the edge of the box, and he kind of lobbed it back in, didn't he? And scored on his home debut. Yeah, great way to make a positive impression. Sunderland won that game 2-1. Sean Cunnington got hour of the goal, and Ian Sampson, who I think we talked about last week, scored an own goal to give Barnsley a little bit of a look in, but we held out. Now, 2010, Sunderland beat West Ham 1-0. Steve Bruce was our manager. Jordan Henderson got the goal for Sunderland. 2011, a year after that, Martin O'Neill was appointed as Sunderland manager. And 9 years after that, Lee Johnson was appointed as Sunderland manager. So we had a couple of managerial appointments on the 5th of December. Varying levels of success, I guess you could attribute to either of those, but...
I was listening to some... I'm trying to remember, this is ringing a bell with us. I was listening to something, might have been one of the pods, and people were talking about this season, this time of the season as being the hiring and firing time of the season. I'd never really considered that before, but you're probably right.
I think you get a few little sort of twitchy trigger fingers this sort of period of time, don't you, where managers are kind of, boards are wondering whether they should stick or twist, and if it's time to make a change, you've got to make a change now because you're not giving them enough time if they don't. And I think Andrew's a big fan of Lee Johnson, aren't you? So we can look back on his tenure with a lot of happiness.
You know I'm not on top form because I've not had any sleep. So stop trying to kick a man while he's down and get me to say something.
No,
Lee Johnson.
Can I tell you? I wasn't on that podcast, and I would have backed you up on that. I think he gets a little bit of a rough deal, does Lee Johnson?
Thank you. At last, I think somebody's come along and said, "Yeah, fair enough."
But yes, no, I think history. It's a funny one, isn't it? Because it's that period of the club's history which you're at the lowest point of history. So people kind of, whoever's involved with the club at that point and isn't ultimately successful gets tarnished with a big sweeping brush. But in terms of what he inherited and then what preceded him, or what came after him, I think you can kind of judge some levels of success on that. He inherited a mess. The person who took over from him was able to get the club up, and look what's happened since. So I think we should be kinder to Lee Johnson in terms of Sunderland history.
I feel the same. I kind of agree with you, but I feel the same about Jack Ross as well. That he gets a bad press, but he actually did do. He did do something that was all part of that journey and where we've landed. We've landed now.
I think it's really interesting because I would agree with you. I think he had an awfully difficult job with what he actually inherited because it was an absolute mess, wasn't it? And we all expected us to bounce back, but that was only immediately bounce back that's only because of our history. All the evidence that was in front of you in terms of what's going on with the club, behind the scenes, on the field, and all that sort of stuff. If you just look at it as a team, again, it's this thing looking at the club separately to looking at the team. You just look at it as a team, it was a complete shit show. So to stabilise that and then get us to the playoff final, again, hindsight would say, well, that's actually not a bad job at all. But look,
I always remember seeing some video footage. I kind of came in halfway through to this. One of my mates was watching it, and it was some footage of Jack Ross and George Honeyman in a pensioner's front sitting room. When I came in, things were that bad at that point for players. I thought, bloody hell, the manager and the captain have gone round pensioners' houses, sort of saying, now, is your grandson? Where's your grandson? We heard he was a canny player, you know. I'm like, things aren't this bad, surely. And we're not got any scouts that...
Well, do you know what? It reminds me of the 88-89 season. Now it was, 10 or 11 or something. And we had a few injuries and a few suspensions. And we weren't playing very well. So I used to, for a few weeks, I took me a boot bag with me shinnies in, and me boots, and I stood next to the dugout, just in case Dennis Smith turned and goes, fancy a run?
Well, Martin, man, I used to carry my boots in the back of the car when I was up until I was 29.
Well, do you remember, it was at West Ham? Was it a West Ham fan in a pre-season game? Harry Redknapp called him out of the stand because he was giving the players a load of grief. He said, well, see if you can do any better. Get yourself on. I think he did all right, as it turned out. But
he wasn't too bad, that lad,
I
was he?
don't believe so.
Yeah.
Right, on that note, we will take a very short break. We'll be back soon.
Does it ever feel like you're a marketing professional just speaking into the void? But with LinkedIn ads, you can know you're reaching the right decision makers, a network of 130 million of them, in fact. You can even target buyers by job title, industry, company, seniority, skills, and did I say job title? See how you can avoid the void and reach the right buyers with LinkedIn ads. Spend $250 on your first campaign and get a free $250 credit for the next one. Get started at linkedin.com/campaign. Terms and conditions apply.
Meet the computer you can talk to. With Copilot on Windows, working, creating, and collaborating is as easy as talking. Got writer's block? Share your screen with Copilot Vision to help spark inspiration, and use Copilot Voice to have a conversation and brainstorm ideas. Or maybe you need some tech help. With Copilot Vision, Copilot sees what you see. Let Copilot talk you through step-by-step guidance so you can master new apps, games, and skills faster. Try now at windows.com/Copilot.
Welcome back to Away the podcast, sponsored by LiveScore Bet. You join us as we enter the end of this week that we're covering, December the 6th. Now, 1893 at the Newcastle Road Ground, Sunderland played Newton Heath, and we beat Newton Heath 4-1. Jimmy Miller scored 2, and Johnny Campbell scored 2. And of course, Newton Heath became Manchester United. 1913, George Holley scored his 8th hat-trick for Sunderland as we beat Bolton 3-2 at Roker Park. And in 1930, this sounds a cracking game. It was Sunderland 6, Liverpool 5. It was 7 goals in the first half and 4 goals in the second half. Jimmy Leonard put us 1-0 up. Jimmy Connor and Bobby Gurney scored 2, and that was 4-1. Bobby Gurney made it 5-3. There was no goal to make it 6-3. Ended up 6-5. Liverpool got a couple of late goals. But apparently it was an incredibly foggy game. And the crowd who was there couldn't see all of the goals because the weather was so terrible. And at various points during the game, it was thought that the referee was going to call it off because visibility was just so bad. So whether it was actually 6-5 or not, whether that was just what the referee has assumed based on what he was told, we don't know. 1997, on December the 6th, Niall Quinn scored a goal to give Sunderland a 1-0 win at Loftus Road. And in 1969, there was another game against Ipswich. Now, Ipswich seem to be appearing a lot in this week in Sunderland's history, don't they? But there was a game at Roker Park against Ipswich.
There was, Martin. I just want to tip my cap to this game. For those that were around, and for the people that maybe don't know, what a terrible season this was, 69, 70, when we're on about Jack Ross and Lee Johnson and the jobs that they did. We were in a terrible place, and Alan Brown was sort of struggling, although he'd made one or two decisions that weren't helping the cause really. But anyway, we had Ipswich, and Eric Gates wasn't playing for them. But we went into that game. We hadn't won a game in 11 matches, and it was as a lad, I can remember what a dire period it had been. 11 games without a win. It was a hard slog to keep turning up. You know, we were seeing draws turn into defeats. We were seeing victories turn into draws. You know, it was just a dirge of a season, and we desperately needed some creativity in the team. But Alan Brown had banished Ian Porterfield to the reserves after Porter and him had fallen out about tactics and formation on a pre-season tour. And it was a hell of a thing looking back on that season. He was a really big miss in that season. Ipswich, they were managed by Bobby Robson.
Right.
At the time, a young Bobby, young into his managerial career. Bobby Robson was the manager, and there were a couple of notable players in that team. One of them was Mick Mills, the England international, and I think he captained England for a while. But he was just a young lad at this point. And they had a really interesting lad who was South African, a lad called Colin Nelson, and he'd come from South Africa. What I remember about this lad, the reason why he stands out, he was a canny player. He ended up getting 2 caps for England, and how he got that was he was given an English passport eventually. And what Ipswich did, I always remember this story. The Ipswich chairman hired Viljoen as his gardener, and because he had a job as a gardener and was contributing something other than sport to the to things, he eventually got his passport.
Yeah,
but
right.
What people might not remember is at the time South Africa were political pariahs for their stance on race and apartheid and things. It was quite difficult for South African people to come here and work. But this lad was a good player, but he was just a young lad at the time, and he he actually scores in this game. But anyway, the game kicks off, and I remember being in the Roker end. It was bloody Baltic as well. It was freezing, and I'd me parka jacket on, me pom-pom hat, me everything, and I was still absolutely blooming freezing watching the game. But anyway, we kick off, and Gordon Harris scored early on to get us off to a decent start, and Colin Viljoen then scores right against the runner play. And then Bobby Park, young Bobby Park, who was spoken about on here, he scores a cracking long-range shot, and it's a really, really good goal to warm you up a bit. And I've just got a feeling watching the game, you know, this is it. The season's going to turn.
How many players did we need, Kelvin?
Come on, I was going to throw that in at the end, Martin. You know, we only 2 players away from a bloody good team. You know, 2 players away from a good team, and one of them was banished to the blooming reserves. You know, him and Alan Brown's worst decision ever. That one. 2 players away from being a good team. But honestly, that day, our youngsters that were on show that day, Todd, Park, McGibbon. Now, we did have Hughes and Stewart on the pitch. Hughesy was sub, I think, that day. But Dennis Stewart was playing. But it was Park, McGibbon and Todd were absolutely brilliant that day and ran the midfield. They ran the legs off the Ipswich midfield. And Todd and McGibbon kept swapping because Todd actually was playing central defence. But he had this great ability. He could play in midfield, Colin Todd. And he used to, him and McGibbon kept interchanging, they played together at youth team level, these two lads. And Mick McGibbon was a handy customer, Mick McGibbon. He actually went to the school I went to.
Oh, really?
Mick McGibbon, he was a few years in front of me. As I started, he just finished. That's him and Brian Chambers, who played for the club. Brian Chambers and him both went to my school, But anyway, the reason, one of the reasons why this game sticks in my head and why I did want to talk about it was it had been so terrible. The season had been terrible, and these draws turning into defeats and victories turning into draws. It was just, for a young lad, it was killing me, But this game, I just thought, I was skipping out the boys' enclosure at the Roker end going, that's it, we're on the road. This is it. And as people will know, we easily finished second bottom and were relegated by 1 point. It was a dreadful season. But the other reason why, so there's a theme, because there's another game I'd like to dip into. One of the themes is Porterfield not playing that season. And you just feel if he could have gotten alongside some of them young players, because he was still a young lad himself, but not as young as some of these young lads coming through, what a difference he might have made. We'll never know because he never got a kick for the season. But the other reason I remember the game was the next day, I think I've said a couple of times, my dad was losing his sight and had started losing his sight at this point. And he used to get us to read the match reports in the paper. And we were talking about Shaq last week. And I can always remember Shaq writing in the People about this game. And one of the things that he said, he described Ipswich as, I'm going to quote him here, the tattiest lot seen at Roker Park for a long time. Punchless in attack, weak in midfield, and slovenly at the back. he's not mincing his words, Shaq, is he? And then he has a special mention for the referee, who's quite a highly regarded referee called Roger Kirkpatrick. You might be a name you remember. He reserved special mention for the ref. Roger Kirkpatrick did all he could to steal the show with the most flamboyant handling of a game I have ever seen. He just would rip into folk, Shaq, so he would. But he did, just to back what I said up, he did say, I hadn't remembered this. It wasn't until I went back to check what it was that he'd said, because I'd always remembered me fella laughing his head off at Shaq being dead pithy about everybody. But what he'd also written was, Todd of Sunderland provided the best soccer. Todd stood out and in polished class set a style that Park and McGibbon eagerly followed in being bosses of the midfield. So he could be pithy, but he wasn't averse to dishing out a compliment. As I was going to say it to you, stole me line. I honestly, I thought, we're only 2 players away. We're on our way. This is it. We're going up. We're going to stay up. We're not going to go down. Alan Brown isn't going to take us down for a second season, but a second time. But he did.
That was one of only 4 wins at Roker Park that season, Kelvin.
It was, and I think I think it might have been the only one that I saw.
Yeah, right.
Yeah,
And
lots of draws, lots of defeats.
connections there again. Mick McGivern went on to have a long coaching career at Ipswich. I think he was in charge of them pretty much under John Lyall. John Lyall was director of football or whatever in the early 90s. I think Mick McGivern was, for all intents and purposes, head coach leading the first team. But what was the crack with Alan Brown and Ian Porterfield? What was the crack there?
So
He played regularly the season before, didn't he?
Yeah, he had. I mean, one of the things was that it was Ian McCall who bought Porterfield to the club. But he all the information I have about that time was Porterfield wasn't really part of the McCall drinking set. There used to be a club within a club, and he wasn't really part of that, even though he was a Scot from Lochgelly, Fife. Porterfield was from. What happened was, I mean, Porterfield was always an intelligent sort of thinker on the game, and you know that Brown had his own way and own style and all these unique ways of training and formations and stuff like that. One of the things he tried to do was to get Porterfield almost to play left wing, and it wasn't that Porterfield didn't want to do it. To the best of the information I've been able to find, it was Porterfield really thought that it wasn't a system that was ever going to work for Sunderland, given the players that they had. He really thought we had some great young players, but we weren't getting the best out of them by playing this really, it was almost defensive kind of system that Brown wanted the team to play. And he had Porterfield doing lots and lots of trekking back. Now, in his natural game, Porterfield wasn't averse to that. He loved to bring the ball out of defence and to play the ball out of defence. He wasn't Jim Baxter. He would put a shift in Porterfield for the team, but he didn't think that this was ever going to work with the players that we had, and he made the mistake. Some of the players that knew Alan Brown quite well knew that when he said, "This is what we're going to do, has anybody got anything to say about it?" Some of the more experienced players who knew him well knew that you don't say anything about it. But Porterfield, being reasonably fresh in from far out and not really knowing Alan Brown too well, had gotten into it with him and decided to sort of challenge. He always says it started off as a professional discussion, and in no time at all, it reached Greaming Pit. And he never played for a season. He almost packed the game in.
Yeah, right.
Because he went on the transfer list. He asked to go on the transfer list, and there were nobody coming in for him. But what he didn't realise was Brown and the club were knocking some of that interest back, and it was Brown. He really took exception to Porterfield's line on this, even though Porter had gone at it. And I'm getting me information there from 3 or 4 different sources that it started as a discussion, and that Porterfield was merely making an observation on and sharing his thoughts because he felt he'd been invited to. But what Brown was saying was, "This is what we're doing. Shut up and get on with it." Was really what the message was. So he spent a year kicking his heels and almost packed the game in. So that's what that was about.
Yeah, I've often wondered about that, and history could have been so very different if he had decided to jack it all in at that point, couldn't it?
Well, when you look at what a key player he was for us, not just in the FA Cup, but he did play his part in what promotion season for part of that. Yeah.
Very good. Right, December the 7th, 1912. This is a game that was the answer to Andrew's quiz question earlier. Sunderland beating Liverpool 7-0 at Roker. Charlie Buchan scoring 5 goals in that game. Now, 1935, on the same day, Sunderland beat Bolton 7-2, and Bobby Gurney scored 5. Rach Carter got another goal as well, netting for the 8th consecutive game, and Patsy Gallagher got the other. There is some debate about Gurney's 5th goal. Now, it's quite an interesting thing because Alex Hastings got injured early on, and again, as we've talked about, no subs in those days, so players had to either hobble around or go off the pitch and leave the team down to 10 men. Hastings had been off injured. He came back on, and they just shoved him out of the wing, hobbling around and making a nuisance of himself. As a consequence, he had to really change formation. And in the press reports after the game, it's kind of attributed to this change of formation that they were able to unlock the Bolton defence so well. But for the 5th goal, Alex Hastings seemed to sort of get in the way of Gurney's shot and stab it over the line. But in the dressing room after the game, he said Gurney could have it. So, Bobby Gurney officially anyway got 5 on that day.
I'd never actually made that connection that it was the same date, Martin.
Yeah,
that's
funny, isn't it?
What a odd little quirk.
Only 23 years apart. 1968, Sunderland played Chelsea at home. We beat them 3-2. Again, it's a week for playing Chelsea at home. Beat them 3-2. Calvin Palmer got a penalty. Colin Suggett and George Mulhall with the goals. 1985, we played a home game against Portsmouth. We got beat 3-0. This is a little bit notable for the reason that Gary Bennett got sent off. He got booked on 79 minutes and he saw red on 78 minutes. So 2 indiscretions in very close succession, obviously feeling very frustrated about the way things were going.
A couple of late birthday cards, you could say, for Gary Bennett.
Absolutely right. He might have had his birthday party booked in for that night, and the game was dragging on. You thought, bollocks to this. Eric Yates got a consolation goal for 10-man Sunderland. Now, we talked earlier about Don Goodman arriving at the club for a record fee of £900,000. A few days later, he made his debut. Now, if put this in context, Dennis Smith sold Marco Gabbiadini, as we've talked about that. I think that's the first mention of Marco for this episode. So we're doing pretty well, weaning ourselves off Marco. But Dennis Smith had sold Marco, wanting to reinvest the money into the team, change things up a bit, bring some new players in. He's bought Anton Rogan with a bit of the cash. He's bought John Byrne with a bit of the cash. Both of them have made a good impression, but they haven't really raised the levels of results. We haven't really kicked on, and the general feeling was that we needed a goal scoring striker. We needed Marco's replacement to come in, start scoring the goals, get things going, and we'd start going back up the league. Of course, we just got relegated from the top flight the season before. So we go into this Wolves game. We've got our new £900,000 striker, club record fee, about to make his debut. Game kicks off with Molineux. And on 6 minutes, the ball goes out of play down the left-hand side, and the linesman's waving his flag. John Byrne's having a bit of a word with him. The referee goes over and sends John Byrne off for dissent. So 6 minutes into Don Goodman's debut, his strike partner's been sent off and obviously facing the prospect of a 3-game ban. So you think, bloody hell, here we go. A minute later, the same linesman is waving his flag. And the referee runs over. Gordon Armstrong's lingering out about the place as well. And Gordon Armstrong gets sent off for telling the linesman what he thought about the decision to send John Byrne off. 7 minutes in to Don Goodman's debut, down to 9 men. And he must have been thinking, what the hell have I got myself into here? Dennis Smith must be thinking, what do I need to do? I've just managed to get Bob Murray to splash the cash on the new striker. We're 7 minutes in. We're down to 9 men against a very good Wolves side. To be fair, I think we held out for an awful long time. Paul Cook, who went on to be a manager of various different clubs, scored a late goal from the edge of the box. But I think for Dennis Smith, that was just a sign that things weren't going to go too well, wasn't it? It was just one of those things. It was a typical Sunderland moment, that one, wasn't it?
Oh, definitely. And what Don Goodman, the amount of times you saw that lad roll up and play brilliantly against us, and when we got him, again, I'm going to say to you, I'm in the boys' enclosure, the Roker end, going, we've got Don Goodman. How many times can you go through that journey? Oh, brilliant, Goodman, bloody love him. He's just what we need. We're only one player away from a great team now. And oh man, and it just seemed like not really because of anything he particularly did, because he always seemed to me to put a good shift in. It never looked like he wasn't trying, or but that just seemed to be that sort of stuff going on round about, and players getting sent off, but players losing form, him and Byrne not quite, it was very, very frustrating period, and I really felt for him in the cup run. So tough to, when you think that and also that he could have made a huge difference to us in that cup run, but he was on fire. I always thought he was like a fit and firing Malcolm MacDonald. That's who he used to remind us of. Supermac, the way that he used to, his power when he used to take off, and his acceleration, and them hips, they were like his hips were like Thunderbird puppets, weren't they? He had this weird sort of gait when he ran, but it was dead effective. I really liked him. Honestly, it was another time where I thought this is going to be a key signing for us. But all systems go.
He was a very, very good player, wasn't he? He'd signed from West Brom, and West Brom were in the third tier at the time. I think they just got relegated. So they had to play in the FA Cup first and second round, which of course Goodman got cup tied in, as you say. So he missed that 92 cup run. And you would potentially argue that if he'd been fit for that, he would have struck up a better understanding with Byrne, because it got to a point where Martin Crosby kind of wanted to play Davenport and Byrne up front to keep that strike partnership going. That was proven so effective for the FA Cup games. But when you looked at Goodman as a player, he had a bit of everything. He could jump and win headers that he had no right to win. He was fast. He was strong. He wasn't particularly skillful in terms of weaving in and out of players, but he had that burst where he just knocked the ball to one side, power past somebody, get a shot in, you finish.
Yeah,
it was a funny one that he kind of didn't quite do as well as you thought he should do at Sunderland. But I think, again, that was probably more of what was going on around the club at the time. I think there was an awful lot of stories also, Kelvin, about days out in Durham with Don Goodman and John Byrne and Anton Rogan. I think they were a bit of a lineup of who like to step foot in the pubs in Durham every now and again. So may have had something to do with it. Not the Glass Spider, though.
Tell you what, I bet you they wish the Glass Spider was still open, because the free publicity they're getting off us this week would have had people queuing up round the block. This, I'll warn you, lads, strap in for this. This is a pathetic joke I'm about to make. We were talking about a player last week, and it's just come to me there. Is Don Goodman just a better version of Johnny Goodchild? Is he like just an older version of Johnny Goodchild?
Yeah, it's his dad.
Yeah. Even as those words were coming out of my mouth, I was thinking, Andrew, this is weak, even by my poor standards. But yeah, there you go. Make of it what you will.
We will indeed. Now, for our last little bit today, we are going to go back to 1974, and Portsmouth came to Roker Park and were defeated by 4-1.
There were, and there is a link with the game I was talking about earlier, lads. But I'll tell you, this game stands as a really thrilling, exciting game. It was a cracking game of football. This Ian St. John was the Portsmouth manager. Portsmouth had just bought George Graham from Man United. Droller, he was called, George Graham. And I was really looking forward to the matchup with Porterfield and Graham. You know, it was like it was played a little bit in the press that these two will have a bit of a matchup, and I was very looking forward to it. But George Graham was injured and didn't actually play in the game. Another lad that was playing for Portsmouth though was Peter Marinello. I don't know if that name means anything to you, but he was a wonder kid who Arsenal signed from Hibs, but he was often compared to George Best, and it wasn't just his football skills that Marinello enjoyed. He would have been right in the Glass Spider and Out with Byrne and Anton Rogan and what have you for a curry and pints in Durham. He liked his social life, but he was a cracking on his day. He had these moments in games, Marinello, and he was always a little bit of a draw for a while. Arsenal pitched him out, sold him to Portsmouth. But he was a guy that, you just felt like if he was playing, you might go along and watch him play because he might do something that catches your eye. The other thing, just another tenuous link here with the game I was talking about in 1969 against Ipswich. Portsmouth's goalie was a guy called David Best, and he played in goals for Ipswich in the 69 game. And he had to pick the ball out the net 4 times and could have easily picked it out about 10 if he hadn't been on his game, and he was. It was a rampant performance that all kind of happened in the second half. We were 1-0 up at half time, but it was a rampant performance in the second half. In the first half, it had been a little bit frustrating because Portsmouth were playing this offside trap, and they kept catching our forward line offside. We seemed to spend inordinate amount of times watching free kicks for offside being taken in the first half. But we got it right in the second half, and the architect of that was Porterfield. He had what a game he played. He completely, whether he'd gotten himself in the fettle for his game against George Graham, I don't know, but he completely ran that game. You could see why he was being tipped for a Scotland cap. The rumour was he was heading into the next Scotland squad. That's how well he was playing. He really was a fine player, Porterfield on his day. And I think I've said before as well, for me, one of the best midfield trios I ever watched was the trio that played this day, Towers, Kerr and Porterfield. Towers would play up the middle, Kerr and Porterfield either side of them, and they just had a little bit of everything going on, them three, and they could do a little bit of everything as well. But he was absolutely brilliant the whole of the game. But in the second half, he unlocked this offside trap, and Marinello, Vic Hallam scored the first goal. Marinello then made with a brilliant dribble the equaliser for Portsmouth, and then we get a penalty. Hughesy scores the penalty, and then we have the marvellous sight of Dick Malone's one of Dick Malone of only 2 of Dick Malone's goals being scored. And I tell you honestly, he slalomed through the whole of the Portsmouth team, and then realising that he'd beat them all, he went back and did half of them again before slipping the ball past the keeper. It was a fantastic goal that he scored. He scored it like a vintage centre forward, he just and he nearly did it again about 5 minutes later. He went on another run. He had these runs in him, Tricky Dicky, we always called him. When he started dribbling, he was a hard lad to knock off the ball when it worked for him. But it was a great goal. And then Pop Robson, who was vintage Pop at that time, he was still reasonably young, and he was he was a spring-heeled jack in the box. Pop Robson, he scored a good goal on 68 minutes. So a fantastic performance. It keeps we're right up there, and you're thinking we're going to go on and do it. We're going to get promotion. We're going to do it this season. Stokoe's got the team ticking and playing. And after the game later that night, Ian Porterfield has his car crash. He's not only got a broken jaw, but he's got a fractured skull, and quite a serious crash. And I always remember it wasn't like, these days, something like that, you'd be seeing it in your Facebook feed 10 minutes after it had happened or something. You'd be getting pictures of the actual crash and what have you. But back then, we caught up with that on the Sunday morning in the late news in the Sunday papers. The ones that came out a bit later carried that story, and he'd been involved in a crash in Washington, I think it was. His car had left the road. He was in Sunderland Hospital, and then later, I think it was on the Tuesday, they transferred him to Newcastle General for emergency surgery. So he's really, really poorly, lad. I always remember one of the stories about that was obviously his parents had been brought down from Lochgelly to be with him in a hospital, and apparently he hadn't recognised them. But when Bob Stokoe had come in, he'd recognised the boss all right. So you're thinking his poor parents, But it was a fairly major situation for the Porterfield family, for Porterfield, major surgery. He does make a recovery, and he's back. He's back for the close season, the 75, July 75. He's back and back playing, and plays roughly half that season. And it looks like we're heading again. It looks like he's playing. He's not quite, we've spoken about this before, not quite back to his full game, but then he plays a game against Southampton and takes a really bad head knock. And he actually comes back after that game. He plays the next two games after that game, but he wasn't right. He scores against Oxford. He scores the only goal at Roker Park. I was at that game, but you just felt, whoa, he's not firing off every cylinder he's got here. He just had a way of moving. He was so, we talked before about the style that some players had, either a Steve Ovett or a Seb Coe, and Porter was a Coe, he was just so graceful on the ball and just had this lovely way of receiving the ball and moving it on, but he didn't look right. And, that injury ultimately saw him leave the club and make his way down the ladder. He put good service in at Sheff Wed, Lenny Ashurst took him to Sheffield Wednesday, and then Jackie Charlton took over. And he's quite highly regarded there for the work he did as a player, and then he coached a little bit there as well before he went on in his managerial career. But I really did just want to sort of acknowledge that, that Portsmouth game, it was a fantastic game of football in itself. Porterfield, all the crack was he's heading to the Scotland squad, he's going to get his cap. And then look what happens on the night time. And it changes the course of his career. He's 28, I think, at the time. So arguably for his position, he's probably got some of his best years in front of him. But there you go. That was Sunderland 4, Portsmouth 1. And Ian St. John went on to have a great career as Jimmy Greaves. Him and Greaves, he formed the Morecambe and Wise of football punditry. That was him.
It did. It was essential lunchtime viewing, wasn't it? For a number of years. It's a love of St. and Greavesy.
Oh man, he used to be. He could be quite feisty. Ian St. John as well, couldn't he? Greavesy used to wind him up and that, and set him away. He was like a little bloody angry Duracell bunny sometimes on the feisty boy. They were a good combination then.
They were.
A different era though, weren't they?
Yeah,
St. and Greavesy.
Without a doubt. Excellent.
It's a funny old game, football,
It's
you
a
know.
funny old game. Certainly is. Well, on that note, I think that's it for this week. We've wrapped it up. Andrew, do you have a quiz question to leave people pondering on for next week?
Yes, as always. The quiz questions are they're meant to tempt people in, aren't they, and get them to come back to the next episode. So here's a little bonus for you. I was this week, Kelvin, my awful joke about Johnny Goodchild reminded me I was going to do some research for you because you said you always wondered what happened to him and how come his last game for Sunderland he scored a hat-trick and then moved on. I was going to look into that. Unfortunately, time's got away from me last night. I haven't had a chance to, but there's a little guarantee for everyone. If you tune in next time, I'll try and give you a lowdown on what happened with Johnny Goodchild. The question, which is the original teaser, I'm meant to say, will be focused on week 8th to the 14th of December. And on the 11th of December, 1999, we had the first ever FA Cup tie at the Stadium of Light. So the question is, who were the opposition and what was the final score in that one?
It does not immediately spring to mind. So.
No. Well, the first 2 seasons of the Stadium of Light, we didn't get drawn at home in the FA Cup. So, the stadium's 3 years old before it actually gets to host FA Cup football. But yes, all will be revealed about Mr. Goodchild and about that game in December 1999.
We'll look forward to that.
Don Goodchild, eh?
Yes. So that lame joke of mine was worth it because I might actually do some proper football research and have some actual football information to talk about next time.
Excellent. Well, that's a promise that we can hold you to.
Woohoo!
So, thank you, Alan. Andrew?
Thank you very much. As always, good fun.
And thank you very much, Kelvin.
Yeah, it's been your complete pleasure, Martin.
As always. Indeed. And thank you to everybody for listening. We hope we have stirred some happy Sunderland memories for you this week. There's been plenty of positivity. So hopefully we'll get a 5-goal blast from somebody this week and we can add another 5-goal haul to our history, can't we? We'll be back tomorrow, of course, building up to the Liverpool game on Wednesday night. That would be a nice game for somebody to knock 5 in, wouldn't it? But until then, it's goodbye from us.
This podcast is part of the Sports Social Podcast Network.
Tis the season for all your holiday favorites, like A Very Jonas Christmas Movie and Home Alone on Disney+.
Should I burn down the joint? I don't think so.
Then Hulu has National Lampoon's Christmas Vacation.
We're all in for a very big Christmas treat.
All of these and more streaming this holiday season. And right now, save big with our special Black Friday offer. Bundle Disney Plus and Hulu for just $4.99 a month for 1 year. Savings compared to current regular monthly price. Ends 12/1. Offer for ad-supported Disney Plus Hulu bundle only. Then $12.99 a month or then current regular monthly price. 18+ terms apply.